She just uses regular, yeah. Just regular old sponges.
So should we wait a few more minutes for people to join?
Yeah, I've got one more person just emailed me. Hey, Zach, just saw your chat note.
You want to join this alley thing?
Yeah, it's 2 o'clock. Yes.
What's that?
Yes.
I'm sending you a link. You have to scroll down to find the link, but it's in Zoom. It'll give us you a nice introduction to Zoom too.
Okay, let's give it 2 more minutes and then we'll get started.
Sounds good. Oh, Kathy, you got in. Good. Okay.
All right, perfect. 16 participants. That's great turnout. Awesome. What do you think, Jess? Do you think we can get started?
Yeah, let's go ahead and
Okay,
get started.
perfect. So I was hoping that we could first do a quick round of introductions, just to give me an idea of who's on the call. I can get started. So I'm Nicholas Mathis I'm the CEO from Frontier. We are a small educational technology company. We are based in Cambridge in the UK, but we also have a presence in the Bay Area, which is where I'm calling from. So I'm at least in the same time zone as you are. And yeah, who wants to go next?
I'll go ahead and go. I just realized I was going to say we could do alphabetical order, but if anyone else is like me, then your name is at the top of the list as well.
Right.
But this is Jess Thompson from the State Board. I think most of you on the call are aware. If not, I'm in the e-learning and open education office at the State Board. And as of the 1st, I'm officially the one focusing energy on accessibility, as well as a couple of other things. So I'm excited to kind of start off with this demo.
Excellent. And then we've had Jerry, Dante, Kathy, Mary, and Susan and Scott introduce themselves in chat in the meantime. All right. Looks like everyone's taking that approach. That's fine. Cool. Well, it's a pleasure to meet you all. Thanks for making some time to attend this meeting, this presentation. So I'll go ahead and I'll share my screen. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Is it somewhat readable?
Yep.
Okay, perfect, excellent. Yeah, so today I'll be talking a little bit about Ally. So Ally is a product that tries to make course content more accessible. And so in terms of, so most of the systems and the platforms that we make available to our students and our instructors, when they talk about accessibility, they usually talk about the accessibility of the platform and the system itself. But they tend to treat the actual user-generated content or the course content as mostly a black box. And obviously, that's that sort of user-generated content or that course content is what the students really are after. It's what they use the systems that we make available to them for in order to get to that course content. So that's kind of the leap that we're trying to take. So we're trying to make the leap towards actually opening up that sort of black box and trying to make that actual course content and the user-generated content more accessible. Oh, and I forgot to say that if you have any questions or comments during the presentation, feel free to jump in at any time. That's how I prefer to do these things. Okay, so before we dive into the details of what Ally does, a little bit of background on some of the problems that we identified in this area. And I'm pretty sure all of you will be very familiar with this, so I won't spend too much time on this. But when we got started, we identified a number of problems in terms of the accessibility of course content, a number of problems that the institutions faced with, a number of problems that the instructors faced with, and a number of problems that the student is faced with. And so in terms of problems that the institutions faced with, one of the main problems is that it tends to be very, very difficult for an institution to get really good insight into how they're doing from a course accessibility point of view, other than the sort of anecdotal evidence or manual checking. And that makes it difficult to sort of identify what you can focus on, where you can provide training, who to target for that training, maybe even where software could be licensed. And so there's a lot of, it tends to be very difficult to get that sort of detailed insight into how you're doing, how you're evolving. And then most of the institutions that we talk to, they have something along the lines of an alternative media lab where students can put in explicit requests for things for course materials to be made available to them in an alternative accessible format. And for any of you that have ever gone through the process of manually remediating content in order to make it available in a specific format, you'll know that this is a very, very sort of time-consuming and labor-intensive process, and usually these departments are very under-resourced as well. So it can take a long time for these items to be turned around and be made available to the student. And then obviously there's legal requirements around the accessibility of course content as well, which means that which sometimes ends up with institutions being sued, and that's an unfortunate and expensive event as well. And then in terms of problems that the instructors faced with, so a lot of this, we talked to a large number of instructors, and it appears to be primarily, or a large part of this appears to be an awareness issue, both in terms of a lack of awareness in terms of what they should be doing, what they're expected to do, as well as a lack of awareness on how to do some of those things and where to find the appropriate guidance for them to make their materials more accessible. And so most of the institutions will have something along the lines of a section of their website dedicated to how to create more accessible course content. But one of the issues there is that tends to be very disconnected from the systems and platforms that instructors and students use, and where they create their course content and how they make it available as well. So because of that disconnect, that's kind of where that lack of awareness and the lack of understanding sort of arises. And then in terms of, obviously there's a number of problems that the students face with as well. And so as I said, many institutions have got this explicit request workflow where they have to put in those requests for things to be made available to them in an alternative format that can take a long time because of how manual that process is, which doesn't really work with their course workflow. And one thing we think is we feel very strongly about is that it also tends to exclude a number of students, both students that are not aware of that explicit workflow, as well as students without recognized disabilities. And we very strongly believe that there's a lot of small things that can be done around the accessibility of course content that will actually make a difference for everyone, and that's where accessibility really starts to bleed into the quality of the course materials, and that's sort of core business of our institution. That's definitely something that we don't want to be excluded from this picture. So that's kind of where Ally comes in. There's a little bit of background on some of the problems that we're trying to address, or at least trying to resolve. And the way in which we envision Ally is not as a separate platform or a separate system, but something that very closely and seamlessly integrates into systems that you're already using. So rather than forcing our users to be aware of yet another system and having to go to it, we actually want to bring our accessibility features into the systems and platforms that they already use, and kind of try to generate a very consistent accessibility experience across the different systems we make available to them. And so the learning management system is a very obvious starting point for us, because it's used very frequently by instructors. It has a lot of course content. Students access it very frequently to get to their course content. So it's a very important player in all of this. So it was an obvious starting point for us as well. And so we are currently executing on a plan to provide an integration with all of the major learning management systems. So we're actually in a very good place there. So we've got an alliance partnership with Instructure. We've got a partnership with Blackboard around Blackboard Learn and Moodle Rooms. And then we've got a partnership with Desire to Learn around Brightspace as well. And so am I correct in assuming that most of the institutions on the call are Instructure Canvas institutions, or do we have any others as well?
I think everyone here is using Canvas.
Okay, perfect. That was the first integration we did. So that one is all ready to go. And then we definitely don't want to limit ourselves to the learning management system. For example, we are already working with the California Digital Library to help them integrate Ally into their open access platform. And then over time, we sort of see ourselves adding Ally and some of its features, or at least that integration into different types of platforms or systems, things like content collaboration systems, for example, Box or Google Drive, or other types of systems like WordPress or Drupal, or just regular websites or whatever. So there's a long list of different types of systems that we eventually over time want to integrate into.
Okay, well, you know what? Yeah, but she still, yes, I get that. I understand.
Hey, Kathleen, we can hear you.
She still should have asked. I just think it's important to just still let us know, not just, I'm going to be in the district.
Kathleen, we can hear you. If you don't mind muting your mic.
I'll definitely let you know when I'm in the district. So a little bit more about what Ally actually does and what features it has. So this is more specific for the learning management system integration. I think other types of integrations will work. The broad strokes will be mostly the same, but there might be some difference in the details. But so the way in which it works is, so the instructor goes into the learning management system, they add their course content to their course site. And this all uses the native LMS experience. So we don't change any of those workflows, or we don't interrupt anything either. So we almost try to shoot for a very invisible experience or a very invisible integration where what we do never gets in the way, but it's always there when they need it. So that's kind of what we're trying to do. And so the instructor goes in, adds their course content. And then at that point, we will do a number of things in order to, first of all, automatically generate a number of alternative accessible formats. And so the first thing we'll do is we'll look at the content and we'll check what type of content is this. Is this a PDF file? Is it a Word file? Is it a presentation? Is it video? Is it audio? Is it HTML, and so on? And then depending on the type of content that it is, we will first of all run it through an automated accessibility checklist that will check for common accessibility issues in that type of content. And so that can be very high level. For example, is this a scanned document, to very to very fine-grained checks. For example, contrast checks at the individual character level. So there's a whole range of things that we check for. We use WCAG AA as the basis of our checklist, and then there's a number of things from the Matterhorn protocol that we add on top of that, and then there's a number of additional checks that we add on top of it that are more aimed at the sort of quality of the course content. And so we run it through that large number of different checks, and then the second thing that we do is we've also developed a set of machine learning algorithms, and what they try to do is they try to extract some of the semantic information that's visually present to our eye, but isn't necessarily there in a machine readable way. So what that means is that it'll do things like identify where the headings are, where the heading structure is, where the paragraphs are, where the lists are, where the tables are, where the mathematical formulas are, where the footers are, and so on. And then using the output from the accessibility checklist and using the output from the machine learning algorithms, we will automatically generate a number of alternative accessible formats. So our primary format is HTML. So we will generate something that we call a high quality semantic HTML version of the content, where we will automatically convert all of the headings that we've extracted into proper HTML heading tags. We'll convert the lists into semantic HTML lists, the tables into semantic HTML tables. We also automatically convert all math formulas into MathML. And so there's a whole range of things that we do there in order to generate that high quality semantic HTML version. And so that's a version that works really well for screen reader users, for example. It makes the document much more navigable, much more readable. It allows them to pull up essentially the structure of the document. And so it has a whole bunch of benefits. It works really well on mobile devices. It's useful for indexing purposes and so on. And so that's the first format that we generate. And then based on the HTML version, there's a number of other accessible formats that we generate. Things like we generate an EPUB version of the content, an audio version of the content, an electronic braille version of the content, and so on. And then depending on the type of content that it is, we also generate a number of other formats. For example, when we come across an untagged PDF, we will automatically generate a tagged version of that PDF using some of the semantic information that we've extracted. And so this entire process takes between 5 to 60 seconds. So after 5 to 60 seconds after the original was added, all of those alternative accessible formats, we will take all of those alternative accessible formats that we've generated, and then we'll make them available to the student and the instructor within the learning management system. And so the approach we take there is that we never replace the original. We always keep the original in place. But every time that the original can be accessed by a student or an instructor, we will make sure that there's a way for them to get to the alternative accessible formats. And that'll become a little bit clearer once we dive into it. So that's the first part of what Ally does. The second part of what it does is based on the output of the checklist and based on the machine learning algorithms, we also have a feedback loop back to the instructor within the context of the LMS. So where we try to provide insight to the instructor on the accessibility issues in their content, and also try to provide guidance to them on how they can fix some of these issues and what they can do about them. And so that entire instructor feedback loop has different goals. So there's a short-term goal in that when they choose to engage with this workflow, it'll generate a higher quality original straight away, which will be useful for students and will allow us to generate higher quality alternative accessible formats. But it's also, the real goal there is the sort of long-term goal of trying to generate a change in behavior over time, so that when they sort of get around to preparing some new course content, they can actually make those things part of their workflow rather than having to revisit them or fix them after the fact. And so once we get into the demo, you'll see that we use a pretty hands-off approach right now. So we never interrupt our workflows, and that's because we're sort of on a path towards trying to find the right balance between maximizing instructor engagement and minimizing pissing them off by telling them that their content isn't very good. So that's why we have a very hands-off approach right now, and but we'll sort of be evolving that as we go along. And then the last part of what it does, of what Ally does, is based on doing this across everything within your learning management system, there's a feedback loop back to the institution as well, where we generate an institutional report that provides you with some really detailed insight into how you're doing as an institution in terms of the accessibility of your course content. And so it'll tell you things like, what sort of content distribution are you dealing with? How accessible is it with and without the service? What are the most common issues? How is it evolving over time? What are the most problematic courses? We don't quite tell you who the most problematic instructors are, but we could if we wanted to. And so there's a whole bunch of insight that we provide there, and that which is then made available to the institution or the institutional administrators or people responsible for accessibility at the institution, so that they can provide some insight into how things are going, how things are evolving, and maybe allow you to identify where training could be provided, who to target for that training, maybe even where software could be provided, and so on. So those are the kind of three major bits. And then before we jump into a live demo integrated into Canvas, are there any questions so far? All right, let's jump into the demo. Okay, so let's just minimize this. And then, so the first thing I'll do is I'll go in as an instructor and go into one of the courses that I'm teaching. And the first thing I'll do is I'll actually add some new course content. So in this example, I'll do it through the Files or Resources tool. And so let's add this one. And as I said, this is all native Instructure Canvas experience. We don't change anything there. You can start to see some of the things that we add in. But in terms of adding the course content, we don't make any changes. And so this is the point, now that I've added this course content, this is the point where Ally in the background will automatically pick up on it. We'll look at what type of content is this. We'll run it through the accessibility checklist. We'll generate the alternative accessible formats, and then we'll generate the instructor feedback for it, and we'll also include it into the institutional report. So all of that is going on in the background now. So before we look at the results, I'll quickly sign out, and I'll sign back in as a student in this course, just to show you what it looks like from a student point of view first, and then we'll get back to the instructor and to the instructor experience. So let's dive in here. And so again, native Instructure Canvas experience, you'll see that the student is now able to see the course content. And so as I said before, in terms of the alternative accessible formats, what we do is we never replace the original, but we always make the accessible versions available next to the original. So for example, this would be a way to get to the accessible versions. If you go into the preview window, there'll be a way to get to the accessible versions here. And it's also not limited to just the files or the resources tool. So if you have anything within a wiki page or a module or an assignment or a discussion will be included as well. So we try to generate a very consistent experience across all of those different tools, and then you'll see the same thing here, a way to get to the accessible version. So let's have a quick look at the document that we uploaded. So let's look at the original first. So the document that I uploaded is an untagged PDF. It's deliberately chosen because it's a pretty complex one. And so it has a pretty complex, somewhat inconsistent heading structure. It's got a 2-column layout that doesn't read well on a screen reader, for example. It's got a lot of complexity, so it's got a fair amount of figures, got a lot of tables. It's got a lot of mathematical formulas. It's got some lists in there, and it's just a pretty long document in general with a lot of complexity. And so for those of you that have ever gone through the process of manually remediating something, this is the type of document that would take a very long time to go through manually and fix up and make accessible. So let's have a look at so when you go to the accessible versions for this content item, we'll show you all of the versions that we've generated. So in this particular case, we generated the HTML version, we generated an audio version, we generated an EPUB version, and we generated an electronic braille version. So let's have a look at the HTML version first. And so the HTML is just standard HTML5. You'll see that it recognized the different headings, converted them to proper HTML heading tags. It sort of extracted all of the paragraphs, converted those to proper paragraph tags. And as I go through this, you'll see that it's recognized some of the tables, convert them to semantic HTML tables. This particular demo doesn't have the MathML conversion enabled, but it does do that as well, and it actually does a very good job at that. And then as I scroll through this, you'll see that it again picked up on all of that complexity, and you'll see that it's a pretty long document. So that's a pretty dramatic difference in terms of turnaround time for them to get access to a more accessible version. So rather than having to put in that request and wait days or even weeks, there's something for them to look at straight away. And then in terms of other versions, so for the audio version, we use an integration with something called Acapella. And so they generate a very natural voice, and we actually inject some of our semantic information into the audio, into the speech. So we provide indications when they're listening to a title, or when they're listening to a table, or so we inject all of the stuff to make it a little bit easier to listen to and give you a better sense of where exactly you are in the document. And then the EPUB version is so let's have a look at that one. So this is an EPUB version of the content based on the HTML version. It has the same content and the same semantics, but it's just a different medium to read it and a different set of accessibility tools to take advantage of. So this has the same content and the sort of same structure as the HTML version. And then the electronic Braille version is a file that you can run through an electronic embosser. So those are so that's the accessible versions at a very high level. Let's go back out and go in as the instructor again, just to have a look at the instructor feedback loop. Okay. And so, as I said in the first part of the presentation, we take a pretty hands-off approach here right now. So we never interfere into the sort of main workflow of the instructor at the moment, but we do always provide a pointer to the instructor of how accessible every sort of piece of course content is. And so that's this little indicator in this accessibility column, for example, here. And then they can engage with that at any time. And it'll tell them how accessible their content is, how it affects people, what some of the issues are, and it'll provide some ideas as well as to different things that can be done to make it more accessible. And when they want to engage with one of these things, they can then sort of open up additional information, and we'll take them through a step-by-step guide of in order to help them make this more accessible. And this feedback is as contextual as possible based on the content item they're looking at. And then when they've gone through this process and they've fixed up a version, they can upload a new file that will replace the original. And at that point, we'll sort of regenerate the score, maybe provide some additional feedback based on the new one that was uploaded, and then also include it into the institutional report. And then part of the reasoning for having something pop out on the right-hand side is that it's always sort of integrated within the context of where they're working already, and it makes it very easy for them to sort of circle through, just go through the different content items. And then the same as with the alternative accessible formats, this isn't limited to just the files or the resources area. So whenever content's being used within a wiki page or a module or an assignment or a discussion, that'll be they'll find a very similar and consistent experience there. So for example, here they get that indicator, it'll open up, and they'll get that feedback and the guidance within the context of where they are. So one of the things that you'll notice here is that right now all of this instructor feedback is sort of content item specific, is sort of based on the individual content item. One of the things that we're working on right now and we'll be releasing very soon is also a way for an instructor to see a summary at the course level. And so they will essentially get a course level accessibility report, which will, one of the main things we want to make sure is that that's understandable even to instructors that aren't very familiar with accessibility. And so that'll include things like, these are the content items that you should look at fixing first because they affect people in this way, and so on. So that's something that will be releasing soon. It will kind of be the flip side of the individual content item feedback. So that's the second part of what we do. That's the instructor feedback loop at a high level. And then the last thing I wanted to show is the institutional report. So what I'll do now is I'll sign in as an institutional administrator. And then, so the institutional report is a standard LTI tool that's added at the sort of administrator level. And this will provide a lot of insight into how you're doing as an institution in terms of the accessibility of your course content. So it'll allow you to look at things either by term or semester, by academic year, or by month. And then if you look at things by semester, it'll actually allow you to look forward by semester. So if any instructors have started preparing their course for next semester, we'll report on that as well, and that'll give you a chance to intervene before the course gets started, rather than to respond to issues as the course is already going. So, and then for each of these different time periods, you'll sort of be able to, you can drill in and sort of drill down, and we'll tell you what sort of content distribution you're dealing with, how accessible it is with and without the service, what the most common issues are, and we sort of divide issues up into severe issues, major issues, and minor issues to give you a good understanding of what should be dealt with first and what's a bigger problem than some other problems. And then another thing that we allow you to do is to pull up a list of all of the courses. And so this is essentially a ranking of all of the courses ranked by those that are doing the worst. And then you can dive into every individual course and get a sort of individual course report, which will tell you what content distribution they're dealing with, how accessible it is with and without the service, what the issues are in there. And so the entire point of this accessibility institutional report is to shed some light on something that's currently very difficult to get really good insight into, and allow you to sort of understand what the issues are, understand how things are evolving, and maybe allow you to help identify where training can be provided, and so on. And so that's the institutional report. And then just to summarize that before we jump into questions. So just to summarize, so Ally has three main feature areas. So first of all, there's the alternative accessible formats that we automatically generate and make available to students and instructors. Then there's the instructor feedback loop, where we provide sort of in the context of the LMS, provide feedback.
Would you like chocolate in exchange?
I would actually, yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So there's the instructor feedback loop, where we sort of provide the insight and the guidance to instructors on how they can make their content more accessible. And then there's the institutional report, where we provide that sort of institutional insight into how you're doing as an institution in terms of the accessibility of your course content. And so the way in which we tend to think about the accessibility of course content is almost as a continuum, and as an institution, you sort of land on a certain point on that continuum, and most of the institutions are pretty far down that continuum. And then everything we do is essentially there to help you move up on that continuum as much as possible. And so first of all, there's the alternative accessible formats that we automatically generate, and that will move you up automatically quite a bit. And then in order to sort of help close down the remaining gap, that's where you do need some engagement from the instructor, from the institution. And so that's where, first of all, the instructor feedback comes in, which will move you up a little bit more. And then there's the institutional report, which allows you to oversee this entire process, which allows you to sort of get a sense of where on that continuum you are as an institution, and then also allows you to identify what can be done to sort of help further close their remaining gap in terms of training or software licensing and so on. So that it gives you a rough idea of how all of these features work together in order to, as an institution, help move you on that sort of accessibility continuum as much as possible. So that's roughly what I wanted to show. So we'll open up to questions now. One final thing that I wanted to say is that we do offer 3 to 6 month pilots free of charge. I think in this particular case, So if that's of any interest, then we'd be very happy to talk about that. We are doing a very sort of a system-wide pilot with the California community colleges as well. And so for them, we're also looking into providing some system level reporting, which will essentially aggregate all of the different schools and make those make it possible to sort of, I'm not going to say compare them, but sort of see the data side by side. And so maybe that's something that could be really interesting here as well. And then, so if that's of any interest, let me know. We can definitely set something up in terms of instructor Canvas integration. We can basically get started straight away. So I'll stop right there and I'll see if there's any questions, comments, concerns, anything else.
Why did it take me so long?
No questions?
Hi, Nick. Yeah, I just want you to put me on the list. Here's the Scott Coffee here at Clark College. I would really like to explore kind of a pilot arrangement with you folks. We'd like to get moving on a solution sooner than later. So just add me to your notes there that I'd like to have a future contact with you.
Okay, perfect. I will do that. Do you have any thoughts on a timeline for that?
If you could reach out to me next week, that'd be great.
Okay.
Sometime we could take this a little further. I want to check with our DSS folks. I think they'd be pretty excited about this product as well.
Yeah, so this is Jess Thompson. I'd like to be in the loop on that because as you kind of wrapped up, Nicholas, obviously kind of that system approach and that system analysis would really interest us at the state board. And so we'd like to try and kind of start small with running these pilots to see how this goes. I think we've already spoken to Clark, and so that gets at Scott's request, and then also Olympic College, I believe, and then kind of see how that runs. I guess I'll kind of say the product seems magical. And the last demo I did for something completely unrelated also seemed really magical. And it flopped. Not that I'm saying that will happen with Ally. It will work gloriously. So
that's exactly why we offered a pilot as well. I completely take that point.
Yeah. So we definitely, I mean, I kind of assume every college is interested because I don't know why someone wouldn't be. So we definitely want to be able to kind of look at this from a system approach and see, by partnering with you as a system, how that would impact the pricing structure and whatnot.
Yep.
And what we could do at the state board to provide the most support for the colleges moving forward.
That makes sense. And I noticed in the chat that there is a question about pricing. So I can give a little bit of information about that too, just to be completely transparent. So our list price is $2 per FTE per year. So we've got a similar model to how you pay for your learning management system. And so that's an all-inclusive price that includes the integration setup, includes SLA, includes support, includes use of third-party systems. So we use Abby FineReader to automatically OCR everything. We use Acapella for the audio versions and so on. And so all of those things, and then further development of the platform. So all of those things are included. If we want to do something at the system level, and I know this is premature, but I'll just say that there's definitely a conversation that we can have there in terms of sort of volume licensing. It's also a conversation that we're having with the California community colleges right now and the Board of Regents in Tennessee. So if at a system level, we can definitely look at bringing that down a little bit.
Great, thank you. I've been kind of stalking Board of Regents in Tennessee, so.
Yeah, I had a big meeting and demo with them about 2 hours ago. So it's very fresh. Great.
Yeah, they're a unique situation. I mean, just working with systems that are doing this not in response to a violation. I'm excited to see we're not alone. And then Zach there has a question about the OCR with math in the chat.
Yeah, that's a good question actually. So in terms of OCR, so in terms of math recognition and converting math formulas into MathML, we're limited to printed math formulas, essentially things that are made available to us in a machine readable format. So in terms of scanned or handwritten math formulas, we currently don't do those. That's definitely something that we're hoping to improve over time. And so in terms of ensuring that the equations are correct, are accurate, so we've got a very significant training and testing corpus, which is actually which includes but isn't limited to the what's it called, INFTI, to INFTI, but includes a number of others as well. And so we do a lot of testing on, so we do our training on the training corpus and then our testing on the testing corpus, and we get some really, the accuracy numbers we get are really good. They're not 100%, so they're usually around the 97 or the 98%. So and then we're hoping to sort of, as our corpus grows, to sort of further train and improve that. So that's kind of where we are in terms of math formulas, and that should be improving over time as our volume increases. Cool. All right. And what grammar is used to render math content in the audio version? So we essentially use the same as what's inside of Google Chrome's Vox plugin. Is it Vox plugin? I think it is. So there's a Google Chrome plugin that essentially Google Chrome screen reader, and we essentially reuse their the way in which they deal with mathematical formulas, with MathML content. Yeah, so there's a question there about what data we look at, and whether or not it's correct that we currently only capture materials uploaded to Canvas. So that's currently accurate. So currently we only look at things that are inside of Canvas. We actually do have it as part of our roadmap to also start including things that are linked to from the course. So one good example would be to, like, if there's any YouTube videos that are linked in, would be for us to pick up on that and go out and check if that video has captioning available, for example, and whether or not the captioning has been auto-generated, and then we can make those things part of the report and part of the feedback as well.
Great. Well, I think the next step that I'll reach out to Clark and Olympic and see about getting you all together, and Nicholas, to find out what we need to do to implement a pilot. What I told everyone in the invitation is that we would also pilot it at our state board instance, which would allow me to create a classroom or maybe a few, and enroll people as instructors, so that they could go in and have kind of a test space.
Yep, that makes complete sense, and that would be easy to set up.
Okay, great. So any other questions, comments from anyone?
Hi, this is Carrie from Centralia, and I will send you chocolate, Nicholas. And,
I'm Belgian originally, so I love chocolate.
Okay, Belgian chocolate. And I'm just curious, how many schools can actually participate in a pilot? Do you have a figure on that?
So we don't have any limits on that. So if you wanted to do a group that's larger than 2, then we'd be open to that. The only limit we have is in terms of the duration for which the pilot is free, which is 3 to 6 months.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? So I will send out the recording later today for anyone that wasn't able to attend, and then if then it sounds like we'll be in touch. Thanks again for making time to attend this, and it was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Nicholas.
And thanks for organizing this, Jess. It was great.
Yeah. Definitely something our system's interested in. So
Glad to hear. Awesome.
all right, I'll be in touch soon.
Okay, talk to you later, Jess. Bye.